Yeah.
Good. Glad you hope you enjoyed it.
We are live with Martin Lee. Start us off with an introduction to yourself and your books, Martin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Martin Lee, otherwise known as MJ Lee, and I write a series of crime novels set in sunny Manchester with a detective, D.I. Ridpath. And he is seconded to the coroner's office from Greater Manchester Police, and he's been working there in the coroner's office for about the last 3.5, 4 years. I've actually been writing most of my adult life. I was a researcher in history, not far from Cas, in a small village called Bradford. And then I went on to work with refugees for a while. And then I ended up as an advertising copywriter for 25 years, working in London, New York, Singapore, Bangkok, Shanghai, and Wigan. And probably the most international was Wigan, of course, because not many people know, but Wigan has the world's largest baked bean factory. Heinz, of course, based in Wigan. And they manufacture, I don't know, gazillions of cans of beans from Wigan. There's even, if you, again, useless facts, there's a baked bean museum not in Wigan though, in Swansea. For some reason, the Welsh have a baked bean museum. But
I did not know that fact about Wigan.
Yes, actually, Wigan still makes humbug as well. It's Little Mints. They still make them. Lovely place. And of course, Orwell wrote Wigan Pier. But I think the place has changed since then. It's actually quite a nice place now.
Yeah, I've been to Wigan Pier.
I mean, yeah, of course, in the book, it didn't exist. They've created Wigan Pier. And it was, Orwell being ironic, I think.
Yeah, we went on a school trip when I was
Did you?
younger.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Yeah, actually, weird thing is a lot of good writers come from Wigan. It's a good crime writers for some obscure reason. I think Steve Sutty, I think Paul Smith comes from Wigan, and a couple of others who are, Wigan seems to breed crime writers.
I think the north of England breeds good crime writers in general.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I was trying to work out, how many crime writers came from Manchester and the north, and there's an awful lot. It's almost. The other place that does it, of course, is even further north, is Scotland. Produces amazingly good crime writers. But yeah, it's the place I found the least number of crime writers, weirdly enough, was Birmingham. I think only Angela Marsons I can remember who came from Birmingham. There was maybe a couple of other people, but Birmingham didn't produce many crime writers. Quite a few Welsh crime writers. Not so many from London and the south. Birmingham, very few. But as you go further north, there seems to be more and more crime prevalent amongst the writing community.
I don't know what that tells you about the north of England.
I think it tells a lot. It's interesting, there's a sort of, I think for me, crime is a way of talking about some of the social conditions and the things you see around you. And in the north, I think the social conditions have always been, harder and tougher and more poverty. And I think that's one of the reasons why people talk about it. I think that crime books are actually social books. In that they're talking about social conditions as much as they're talking about a crime. And I think that certainly when I start writing a novel, I try to start with an idea that I'm trying to get across, something I've noticed about society or about crime or about the police that I want to get across in a book. And I think the North is one of the areas that you certainly notice things more than anywhere else.
So the new book, let's talk a bit about the new book.
Sure.
Because it's only just out. I know Mills Pixie, who hopefully will be joining our chat soon, was reading it and enjoying it. She was talking about it in the group.
Oh, great. So on Thursday. It was last Thursday. It's called What the Shadows Hide. It's the story, again, it's a Ridpath story. It's actually number 9 now on the whole Ridpath oeuvre, if you want to use a horrible French word. And in this one, he is called in to investigate when 2 desiccated bodies are found walled up in an old warehouse, and there's lots of old warehouses in the centre of Manchester, and he's called in to investigate. So far, the police have spent 6 months and found nothing, no clues, no suspects, no forensics, nothing. So Ridpath is called in and he has to come at it from a different angle, which he does. So he started looking for who committed the crime of walling the people up. He wanted to know who the victims were. And that brings into the equation things like genetic genealogy, one of the growth areas of policing at the moment, and also on the way that Ridpath approaches crimes himself and approaches his work as a coroner's officer. So it was great fun to write, and hopefully as good to read. And in fact, I just found out, I think yesterday, that the book was picked as the pick of the week by no more renowned newspaper, renowned for its sense of taste, than The Sun this week, which was actually quite surprising. So it's the pick of the week in The Sun. Good to see.
Good to see. We've got some comments about it already. So okay. Laura said hello. Mary O'Regan has said it's great. Mills has said she finished the latest last night.
It takes me 4 months to write these things, and it's funny. I had one reader who messaged me. It came through at 12 o'clock, obviously on her ebook reader. She'd finished it by 6 in the morning, and I think, it'll take me another 4 months to get the next one. Sorry, but great that people are enjoying it. Thank you, Mills. I'm glad you liked the latest one last night. Sorry, it's going to be about another year before the next one comes out.
So the 2 things I really liked about it, because I've read it as well.
Oh, thank you, Kaz.
Were the appearance of Jane Crossed. I love that there was the mixture of the 2 series.
Yeah. I deliberately, usually, I wanted to introduce Jane into the book. One of the things I hope I've created with the Ridpath and the Jane Sinclair novels is a little world of Manchester. It's my world of Manchester, if you like. I don't think it's the real Manchester. It's my world of Manchester. And the city, if you go back there, I hadn't been back because of COVID. I hadn't been back for 3 years. And I went back last year. And I was amazed at how much the city had changed in the 3 years I was gone. There was this forest of cranes throughout the city now as they're knocking down the old warehouses and the old warehouse districts and building these new skyscrapers. And I think Manchester's caught in that cusp now between the modernity it wants to be, but it still wants to hang on to its roots. And unfortunately, it's the balancing act. It's not handling very well at the moment. But for a crime writer, that gives a lovely tension of between the old and the new. Fascinating, again, useless piece of information, of course, is that Dickens visited Manchester in 1854, about a month before he wrote Christmas Carol. And if you look at the illustrations of the Christmas Carol in the first edition, 2 or 3 of them have Manchester as a backdrop. And and I think that's the old Manchester, and the new one's being given birth at the moment, and it's always a sense of tension that's going on. But I'm glad you like Jane being in there, because she adds this idea of genetic genealogy, of which she's a specialist, into the mix of looking after. And actually, in this book is the first time I ever described Jane Sinclair. Normally, I hate describing characters. I much prefer let the reader imagine who they are and what they are. But I actually decided to describe her in this book.
And the other thing I liked was all the links to the genetics.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on it. The weird thing is, even though genetic genealogy is a really big growth area in policing, not in England so much, but in the US, with catching the Golden Gate killer after the guy had actually stopped killing in, I think, 1992, but they finally caught him in 2016 simply because they had his blood or his DNA on record, and they matched it with a relative who had uploaded their DNA into one of the genealogy sites, Ancestry or 23andMe, and they matched it, and that's how they discovered that the Golden Gate Killer was an ex-policeman. And there's been about 3 or 4 more cases since then of using DNA to match them. Very few books written about it, weirdly enough. I think there's Michael Connolly in a couple of his books has touched on it, and a very good writer and a good friend called Nathan Dillon Goodwin has written a lovely series called the Venator series, which I think there's 2 books in the series, and they deal with genetic genealogy. But he's sorry.
I think it's a topic that scares a lot of people because it's not the easiest to understand.
No, weird thing. I think the basics are quite easy. It's it's matching DNA with somebody else and finding a link, because genetic genealogy uses the information you get from DNA as well as traditional genealogy techniques. Using documents, birth certificates, addresses. Family lineage, and merges the 2 together to find links with people. It is being used more in England. I think the only one case I know where genetic genealogy has been used was a murder in Bristol in 1987, where the police kept the blood, and in 2015 a relative was arrested, and they matched the DNA to the relative and found him through the relative. I think it was a sister was arrested, and they matched, and that's how they found this guy who'd been free since 1987. And I think they arrested him in Bath, close to Bristol, and of course since been charged and imprisoned.
I think there's a whole story in someone innocently uploading their DNA to a family history site, hoping to find like missing relatives, and then discovering that they've got a serial killer in the family.
Yeah, it could quite happen. If you go back and you find that, it would mean the serial killer would have had to have uploaded his DNA as well. But it could happen. With the latest book, I actually don't use it to find the killer. What I thought for me was to turn it on its head, and I think it's going to be used a bit more now, is I used it to find out who the victims were. The fact, again, part of the research you do, I found it in Australia now. People are looking at the moment looking for a victim of a murder, I think in 1992, and through his DNA, they've been able to produce a likely image of him. Certain DNA has blue eyes, has particular color hair, has particular skin type, and through his DNA, they produced a photo image of him. And that's what they're using to try and discover who this victim was. I think the Dutch police last week are doing the same thing in one of their investigations. It's a fascinating, topic. But I'm glad you did you understand it? One of these things you write them, hopefully you simplify it enough that everybody understands. I mean, it's difficult for you because you've got a biology degree, but hopefully talking to other people, whether people understood the whole process
I've
of genetic genealogy.
Got a degree in human genetics.
So. And, even worse. Was it simple? Obviously it wasn't complicated enough for you, but was it simply enough explained?
I think it was really well explained, and it didn't cross that line, because I think anyone who's a scientist, I know there's a whole thing about the CSI effect.
Yeah.
Gets really annoyed when things are done badly.
Yeah.
I hate bad science and things. I can't watch CSI. I'm banned. I shout at it.
I can imagine. Yeah, the instant way that CSI suddenly finds things that normally take a week to, analyze.
I think I once saw an episode and they matched someone to a crime scene because they had like 3 alleles in common, but you have that many in common with a banana.
Yeah,
exactly.
Was it with monkeys? It's 99.67 or something. Is the combined DNA or the match of DNA is very close with monkeys. There's very little difference.
Yeah, we're really similar, so nice. But yeah, no, I liked it. It wins my genetic seal of approval.
Oh, good, thank you. And hopefully, the readers who don't have degrees in human genetics understood it as well.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
Good.
Donna said hello. Mills says she has a bone to pick with you. Your endings are always so good, so cliffhangery.
Yeah, I sometimes think about writing cliffhangers. This I try and avoid. I've done it twice, I think, in this series, both times because I wanted there to be a cross to the next book, and it's particularly important for the next book that I ended where I did on this one, because there's a couple of strands that are left sort of dangling, which I wanted to dangle into the next book, which I think sometimes annoys readers and annoys me sometimes as well. But hopefully I've done it in such a way that it's interesting for the next reader, and the crime itself within the book is always solved. It's always a standalone crime.
I think it depends on the person reading. Does it? I don't mind a cliffhanger.
Yeah,
but I know Kath Middleton in our group is particularly anti cliffhanger.
exactly. I have the thing that I always solve the crime that I posit at the beginning of the book. That's always solved. That's always tidied up. That's always a whole. Generally the cliffhangers are on Rithpat's personal relationships, his relationship with his daughter or his wife or Mrs. Challoner. So the crime itself is always solved. So I hope that it's the personal relationships that people want to read about as well as simply solving a crime. I'm just checking Laura. Yeah, Laura, that's the sibling was for Bristol, when I think it was the sister who was caught for domestic violence. They took her DNA and that matched with the killer's DNA. But they could only do it because they uploaded it. There's a committee, as ever in England, there's a committee that has to allow this to happen. I put it in the book, and it's called WASPI or something in the committee. And they've, I think in the last 9 years, they've only allowed 115 or 120 of these matches to be made. But this one in Bristol was found after one of those matches. Everything's done by committee in England.
Yeah. Laura says cliffhanger is okay, as long as you're not waiting years for the next book.
No, this one is actually due out next February. So I'm just doing the research now, and then I'll write it when I'm back in Manchester over the summer, and then the long process of editing begins. The years of editing. But
will you be able to write a whole book in Manchester over the summer?
Probably not, but I'll get the first draft done. I was talking with Kaz before. I should explain. I live in Taiwan for about 8 months of the year, and I live in Manchester for 4 months of the year. So I generally write in Taiwan and research in Manchester in the UK. But this year, because of certain things, I'm going to write in Manchester this year, which will be interesting to see whether I can actually write in Manchester or not. We'll see.
It'll help with the research though for Manchester, because you can just pop out if you've got a
question. Yeah, I can. Frankly, I usually every year I go back to Manchester, and there's certain places I look at. I'm an awful. So I quite often take the like Manchester tours. The tourist tours, if you like, and these are great for reminding me of places that I've forgotten about in Manchester. I think last year I went on one. A lovely guy did it, and he showed me a couple of places I'd never seen before in Manchester, which I thought was great. As somebody who lived there for so long, you tend to go blind to some of the areas. And the next one I want to do is like I'd like to do a tour of Stockport, which I think Stockport's quite an interesting area. They've got old caves there, and there's caves under the main town area. So it'll be quite interesting to do that. But there's some lovely stuff there's a wonderful hall in Manchester University that we looked at, which was very beautiful. And then there's another place not far from there, which is an old bomb shelter, which links, nuclear bomb sort of evacuation shelter that links to the town hall. Fascinating places. I'm trying to work out a story around that place at the moment. We'll see.
Well, you pop out to Altrincham in this recent book.
Yeah, in this one, I popped to. I live in the south of Trafford. I live in, so I pop to Altrincham quite often. Yeah, this one, Altrincham plays a big part. Again, research. Anybody heard of Vino's cough medicine? You ever heard of it? Oh, it's a very old thing then. Or Vicks Vapor Rub, invented by a man who ended up living in Altrincham. He went to the States, found it, brought it back to England, and then created these things, and then retired to Altrincham back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Fascinating man. Nobody knows who he really was, by the way. He called himself a doctor.
For a little while. I lived in Altrincham.
Did you? It's actually, I mean, yeah. It's very cheechy, very, it's become very, it's a very nice place to live, but it's, as I describe it, I think as a cozy place where crime happens behind the curtains rather than on the streets.
I can imagine that now. I mean, it was a long time ago that I lived there.
Yeah. It's become, now they've opened Altrincham Market, which is like a very nice place to sort of spend a fortune on coffee and pizza, and the whole area has become very, I mean, again, it was I think Altrincham was one of the town centres that they screwed up immensely, as many town centres. Stretford was another one, and Sale they messed around with during the 50s and 60s. They destroyed a lot of town centres, particularly in the south of Manchester, and now they're trying to rejuvenate them and being pretty successful doing it, I think.
Yeah, it depends. I think there's a lot of similarities between Manchester and Leeds in that way. And
yeah. I think, I certainly, again, having, I think I visited Leeds a couple of 4 years ago, and again, I remember it when I was in Yorkshire in the late 70s, early 80s. It's a very different atmosphere in Leeds now, just in the same way that different, again, it was mills and wool and, and now very much has that sense of creativity and energy, I think, that was missing when I knew it in the early 80s. I mean, again, it's that, the tension of a city that's changing and going through the process of change, which they all did, of course, back in the 1850s or early 1830s, when wool first went into Yorkshire and cotton into Manchester. And now it's going through its second industrial revolution, and generally driven by the creative industries for both Leeds and Manchester. I think Channel 4 is at Leeds, right? Or Channel 4's
moving to
Leeds. Yeah. Manchester immensely affected by the move for BBC and ITV into the old Dockland area. I think immensely affected, again, that sense of energy and creativity that comes from the broadcast media.
They're moving into an old nightclub.
Into?
Channel 4, they're moving into what used to be an old nightclub.
Oh, really? Oh, works for Channel 4, I think. You ever go there?
It burnt down and they've revamped it.
Okay.
Really near the
with disco balls and for Channel 4 again, have they?
Probably.
Did you ever go?
I think probably once. Back in the day. Yeah.
Back in the day.
My kind of there were other nightclubs I frequented more.
Yeah, I mean, Manchester, of course, is famous for places like Hacienda and all those, and the Conti and places like that. Of course, the Hacienda they knocked down a good 10, 15 years ago now,
Yeah, they shut them down. There was a great venue in Leeds that was under the railway arches.
Yeah.
And that's been shut down. That used to be a really good one for like live music and things, and had all these things up on the wall of people who'd played, and it had like all the great like bands and things, and then it's just completely gone now.
Yeah. Again, in the book I mentioned there's Ian Curtis from New Order. There was a famous mural of Ian Curtis on Pike Street, I think is the name of the street in Manchester. Again, it's that tension. It's a famous mural that's been up for quite a while, almost like an icon or an iconic image of Manchester. And I wrote about it in the book, and then last August they painted over it to put an advert there for some rapper. And I thought, talk about sort of again, that tension between the modern and the new, and getting rid of the old. You know, Ian Curtis' New Order was something that we should forget about. And of course, you know, he was an icon of Manchester and of the period of the period of Manchester in the 80s and 90s.
That's not cool that they painted it over. What are you working on at the moment?
A couple of things. I'm writing Jane Sinclair. So I write one Ridpath, then I write Jane Sinclair, then I swap between the two. So it gives me a bit of freedom, you know, the different styles of the book, so it keeps everything fresh for me. So I'm writing Jane Sinclair at the moment, her number 10, I think, for Jane Sinclair, and this time she's in Australia. So I've been doing a lot of research into Australian convict history and that sort of stuff. So, and links with Ireland and the you know, the Young Ireland movement. And then I'm at the same time I'm researching Ridpath. I've got a vague idea at the moment, so I've got to. But I'm like Paul Gitcham, you know, and quite a few authors like Stephen King is the same. I'm a total pantser. So quite often I'll start the book and I have no idea who the murderer is. So I usually have like a few waypoints. You know, I usually know what the murder is. And I knew this time I wanted to talk about genetic genealogy. I knew I wanted Jane Sinclair in it. But that was about it. And so then the great thing about a police procedure or a police investigation is there are certain things a policeman must do as he's investigating a murder or any crime. And in fact, there's a senior investigation officer's handbook, which reminds them of all the things they need to do. And it gives the book a structure. So even though, you know, I'm writing, I haven't worked out what I'm doing, I know that for the policeman, he must do this next. You know, he's got to check CCTV, he's got to check witnesses, he's got to check door to door, etc., etc., etc. So there's always a structure on what I need to do next. And then the interesting thing is me finding a way of twisting the novel, twisting the experience for the reader, so it's constantly fresh and new for them. One of the reasons I do it is because if I don't know who the killer is, then the reader isn't going to know either. I can't give any subconscious clues for reasons. The other writers works. I mean, Marion Todd plans everything on an Excel spreadsheet. The guy who does Harry Hole, Yo Nesbo, he writes like a 200-page synopsis before he writes the 300-page novel. Other writers are Jeffrey Deaver. He does a complete 100-page synopsis before he starts writing novel. For me, I think I make it up as I go along. It's it's imagination. That's what I hope comes across.
Yeah, Marion is becoming legendary, isn't she, for her spreadsheets?
Yeah, for her. I don't know if you're there, Marion, but for her spreadsheets, the Marion spreadsheets. But I heard a couple of weeks ago she mentioned that she'd gone off the spreadsheet and she was moving away from what she'd planned. You know, which I thought, wonderful. Welcome to the dark side.
How does that work with a Jane, though? Because you were saying with the Ridpath books, even if you're completely pantsing it, you know the sort of steps of the investigation.
Yeah.
But Jane doesn't follow.
No, but Jane, there's another structure, which is two things really. A genealogy or genealogist has certain steps they must do. You know, for example, you go backwards from a family, you ask who the fathers were, the grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and you go through the census, through the 1939 census if it's in England, and you can go back that way. So it has a structure. And also, because Jane is often talking about the history of something, I stay 99.9% to the real history and the real chronology. And my training as a historian means I hate it when I fake history. I prefer to throw the book away or think it through, work a way of working with the actual history and the dates that things happened rather than making it up. And if I do err, I'll always tell the reader that I've done that. but so it's a different set of structure. In the Ridpath, it's very much the police structure, and then in Jane's case, it's a genealogy and the historical truth of what happened, or the truth as I see it anyway.
There's a bit of love for the Jane Sinclair books on the comments. Maureen,
yeah, Maureen just said she's just started the first one, which first one's about Ireland, actually right now, of course, right now 107 years ago, which was the Easter Rebellion, which was actually I think it was April, but it was Easter, and Easter's coming up in 1916, and that's the first one. And again, a woman or a man looking for his parents. Who were they? And why did they take him to America?
Yeah, and then someone saying they're delighted to see there are 9 books already.
Yeah, actually weird thing, as you can see, I've done 9 books for Ridpath and 9 for Jane at the moment. I'm just writing the 10th for Jane as we speak, and then I start the 10th for. So that's what I do, 1 and 1. And actually, I'm just. Over the winter, that's why I'm a bit behind and why I've got to work in Manchester. I wrote a new series, or the first book in a new series, but it's miles away from publication yet. It'll take me another year to wrestle it into shape. But it's just quite a rough idea for a new series.
Oh, this is exciting! You can't go away with just saying that you've written it. You've got to give us a little bit of detail.
It's a little bit. It's still very rough because I'm again. I've just done the first draft, and it's really. It's only going to be 5 books in this series. I don't want to do another long. So it's going to be 5 books, but it's going to be a series that, again, each crime ends at the end of each book, but there'll be a continuing story for 5 books, and it's really about a woman detective who discovers that everything she thought about the world and her relationships was totally wrong.
Ah, that sounds phenomenal.
Well, hopefully, and now I've got to write the others and make this one work. But it'll take me at least another year to get it into the place where I'm happy with it. It's one of the reasons that the Ridpath books work and the Jane's book work for me as a writer, because I spent about a year before I think submitted the Ridpath book to Canelo, writing and rewriting and redoing until I was happy that I had enough depth in the character to make him a series, and also that there was enough meat there to make it interesting for readers. And again, with this new one, I'll do the same thing. It just takes a bit of time, as I had. It's like an onion. You hope that you can add the layers of an onion through a character, that he's always going to surprise you, or you discover something new as you're reading them, and also as a writer, that you discover something new as you're writing the book.
Would Canelo take on that one as well, do you think?
I haven't decided yet. I know. I haven't decided yet. It's, for me, it's a bit. I shouldn't even be talking about it. It's a bit early days yet. But certainly, Canelo would look at it. I would hope they'd look at it. I'm sure they would. But it's fun.
I mean, Canelo is sort of fast becoming one of my top kind of crime imprints.
Yeah, I mean, they're great to work with.
Authors that are published by Canelo.
I mean, they have. Firstly, they're great to work with. They've got good editors. The people are lovely to chat with, and they actually put their awful thing. I mean, you think it'd be obvious, but they put their authors first, rather than and the authors and the work first, which is in the publishing world quite rare. Honestly, having dealt with a couple of other publishers, and no names, but it's wonderful dealing with Canelo and the way that they handle and improve an author's work, and they're great. They're great to deal with.
I honestly know. I mean, I've got no sort of ties to Canelo. I just realised when I was sorting through my books the other day, and I realised that so many of my favourite series is.
Yeah, them, and they've really come from nothing in the last 5 years. They've done. I mean, they've got some. Nick Louth and Marion, Rachel Lynch, and they've just been putting on some new great writers. Alice Hawkins, who writes great mysteries, and Sarah Ward, actually from Derbyshire. She's just, I think, got a new book coming out with Canelo in the next month or so, which I think will be a real star when it comes out. I think it's got a great little Agatha Christie sense to it, which I think will do very well. Called the Birthday Girl, I think it's called, but it'll be wonderful.
Yeah, Alice's book is really good if you like historical.
Yeah, I've never read that. I read her first one set in Oxford. I think it was 2013. It was released, which I loved. But I haven't read the latest one. I think she's just started a new series with Canelo, and that's featuring a new character. I think she's just created, which is wonderful. She's a great writer. And again, you know, one of the things you try and do is evoke place. And Alice is great at evoking. In fact, you know, Alice is great at evoking Oxford. For me, is Manchester. For Marion, is I think it's Aberdeen. Oh, this will kill me now, of course. I'm trying to remember. It's Scotland. And then you got Sheila, you know, who's the south of England around Bournemouth. Sheila Bugler, who's doing some lovely stuff in Bournemouth. Again, all these are sort of a sense of place to them. And I think the best crime novels do have a great sense of place. I mean, what would Rankin be without Edinburgh? You know, Rebus without Edinburgh.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's why we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the northern sort of crime authors being so strong. I think you can't beat that sense of place in a book, and especially in a crime book, it really brings. I'm thinking like Liz Mysteries. Have you ever read Liz Mystery series?
Bradford, her sense of Bradford. Yeah,
like you can't get a better sense of Bradford than through those books, really.
Yeah, again, you know, that sense of the grey stone of Bradford that I remember, and the rain of Bradford I remember, and mixed with that, you know, the scent of curry wafting through the air. Weirdly, as we were talking, I've just realised the only other place I know that has such a strong crime heritage, and it's again very strange, is the Fens, Norfolk. There seems to be like quite a few series of books around Norfolk, which always surprises me. But again, very good books, you know.
I wonder if it's the bleakness of the landscape. I wonder if that's why like Scandi crime is so big as well.
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely part of it. It's this because it doesn't, the bleakness of the landscape is reflected in the bleakness of the murders and the deaths, and also the attitude of the people to the landscape. Because no landscape is on its own. It's always viewed by somebody. The fact you see it as bleak, I would agree, but maybe somebody in Norfolk would see it as open. And, you know, a hill in Norfolk or a mountain in Norfolk is 50 feet high. You know, nothing compared with things you get in West Yorkshire. And again, you've got the ruggedness of Scotland, which lends itself to great crime work, you know. But it's funny, isn't it, how it does it? Yeah, and then to think Matt Brolly's doing a good series as well in the south, in Bournemouth. So there are a few authors from the south.
Yeah,
Agatha Christie maybe for Cornwall.
Yeah,
no, we're going to get loads of sort of emails. There's some good authors in the south now, you know.
They're genuinely at I mean, there's good crime writers across the country.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you one of Sam's questions, or Sam's favourite questions, which if Ridgepath was adapted for the TV, who would you play?
Oh, who would I play? I'd play Chrissy, the researcher. You know, sorry, there's actually, who's a real person, by the way. Sorry, the name is a real person. Chrissy, who's the police researcher, who appears in the books. She's a Manchester City fan, and basically, you know, her job is to always follow up with Holmes, to do research, and that's who I play. Because actually, the weird thing is, I am always comfortable with archives and doing research than I am with people. You know, my happy place, I think, again, function of my youth is a library or an archive is when I'm really happy, making discoveries through an archive and through research. So I think I'd be Chrissy.
And
who would you be? I'm going to change the question. Who would you be?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I would not want to be in a TV series.
Wouldn't you?
No, I'm gonna absolutely honest. I hate it. I would not want to be on camera.
I do it. Well, you're on camera now. You know?
I know.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit TV. I actually enjoy it. You know, it's. You always look at yourself and think, oh God, I hate seeing yourself on TV. Worst is hearing your voice. It's something.
Yeah, I was on TV recently with a student from my school. Like he made this crazy invention, and it was on calendar.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
I didn't watch. Just.
Yeah, I had something last summer with in France. I was doing with Normandy, the D-Day landings, and I did it for BBC, and then I looked at it. Oh, who is that idiot? Why doesn't he get a facelift or something? It's awful, isn't it? Again, you look at yourself and hear yourself and think, who is that? I'll probably look back at this and think, who is that person talking on camera?
But yeah, no, I wouldn't want to be. I'd be a scientist somewhere, like hiding.
Yeah, you'd be the forensic scientist, one of the CSIs,
Yeah,
who
all
goes
hidden up in the.
Yeah, exactly. All very. Yeah, I talked to some of the CSIs in Manchester actually, and they always say it's always a bit weird that they've got the body next to them and they're sitting there eating their sandwich. But after a while it's a job. It's just another job, and their job is to collect evidence from that particular site.
Yeah, it's a really interesting job. You've got to admit.
Yeah. He loved it, and loves it, but because for him every job is different.
Yeah, I can imagine. Would you put? So we've had Jane in the Ridpath series. Is Ridpath going to appear in a Jane book?
Yeah, well, yeah. I planned the Janes about three in advance, so I'm writing one now, and then I might write another, but a short one, and then I've got a big one to do about a year from now, a year and a half, and Ridpath may come in then, but only really as a fairly minor character, nothing like the role that Jane has in the other one. Again, because the Sinclair novels really aren't about a crime; they're about uncovering a mystery, a family history or a mystery or a family, a missing family, and it's not really about crime so much. So the plan is to put him in, I say, the third one on, but only as a sort of like a fleeting role. I did consider doing a romance between the two, and I thought, no, can't handle that. It wouldn't work. So it was one of those fleeting ideas you have, and no. Think of something else.
They could definitely be friends, though.
Oh yeah, I think that's obvious, even from the book, What the Shadows Hide, that they're going to be friends, and it might be a case of bringing up for advice, or it's more likely that Jane Sinclair might come back into the Ridpath series in the next 3 or 4 books from now, again offering advice on particular stuff, particularly as if I'm as I'm working out the plots for these things, I'm reading lots of things, finding out what's new happening. I try and make the Ridpath investigations quite topical. And so, you're looking for ideas constantly. And again, the genetic genealogy, I think, is topical. It's going to be even more topical in the next 2 years in England as it expands.
So while you're doing all that research and sort of getting into the mind of Jane, have you done your own genealogical investigation?
Yeah, I've done my own. My background's Ireland, so it's a bit of a nightmare. I can go back. I can go back on my father's side to about 18, a bit earlier, about 1780, 1770. And we still own the same land in Ireland. Myself and my brother still own this small plot of land over in the west of Ireland in Mayo. We've had since late 1700s. But my mother's side is much more difficult to do, and I can only go back there to about 1850. It's much harder. But Ireland's impossible to go further back. If you're Irish and Catholic background, very difficult to go back later than 1750, 1760. There are just no records. The Irish tradition was always an oral tradition, and it was never a documented tradition. And actually, real documentation only came in 1864. But my stepfather's family is Scottish, or was Scottish. And we can trace back, because the Scottish records are great. So we can trace his lineage way back to about 1430, when he was a family of merchants. And most of them came from the very north of Scotland, a place called Bray, I think it is, right closest city to, or town to, land of John O'Groats. So that's where he's from. But it's great fun, and I would tell everybody to look at their family history, talk to their parents now, talk to their grandparents now if they're still alive, and get the family history done before you lose those memories. And they are memories, because once those people pass away, the memories are gone forever.
It's really interesting.
Yeah,
we've gone the other way around in our family. My mum's is really easy to trace.
Yeah. Yorkshire or
she's from East Anglia, and hers
Norfolk again.
Well, Suffolk, but hers goes back to like Ethelred.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then my dad's is Scottish.
Yeah.
Yorkshire and then Scotland.
Yeah. But Scottish records are pretty good, you should be able to go back with your dad pretty easily.
He's got it back so far, but I think he struggled after.
Yeah, there's the place in Edinburgh, it's the Scottish Record Office in Edinburgh. I mean, you can do it online, but it's good to, if he's, sorry, I'm talking, the best thing for Scotland is the Kirk records. If you can find the area in the Kirk, the church nearby, they have records usually going back a long, long way. Particularly if people were naughty, then they got fined by the Kirk elders, and then they wrote it in their book.
Oh, yeah, we've got some of those in my dad's family history.
Yeah. For me, it's my mum's side. Is the sort of not straight people, we say. They're wonderful. I've got one relative who, between 1901, the census in Ireland, 1911, he is 10 years, and he ages like 37 years. And the reason why was because in 1908 they passed the Old Age Pensions Act. So suddenly he had to be older to apply for the old age pension. Wonderful. Good luck to him. Hopefully he got it. I think it was something like 24 shillings a month or something then.
But is that why you sort of started off writing, Jane, that fascination with history?
Yeah, definitely. I started doing my family history research about 2000, 2001. And that's why I'd written the Death in Shanghai series, which is the Danilov series, because I'd lived in Shanghai for a while. And then I was looking like, what do I want to write next? And I suddenly had the idea of doing history, genealogy, and an investigator. And I thought that mixed everything together, which I love doing, and it's been great fun. And again, since I started it, which was 2015, I think was the first book, 2016. It was the first book in that. The whole process has changed with, lots of new information coming online, new information available in record offices. And the latest one for people, actually, if you're listening, if you have relatives who served in World War II, from April 1st, they're making their service records for World War II veterans free. So if you apply, it's something it used to cost 30 quid, I think, a record. It's now free from April 1st. So if you have relatives who served in World War II and you want to find out what they did and where they did it, you just need to apply to the Ministry of Defence, I think it is, yeah, MOD. Great,
Wow.
it's changing all the time.
And with Jane Ann Ridpath, you've got two kind of really unusual takes on crime novels, haven't you? Even though Ridpath, they're like a police procedural, he's not fully in the police, is he? You know, he's got
No.
that.
He's partly the coroner, and again, that's one of the tensions within the book, because the difference between a coroner and a police officer, if you like, is that the police chase convictions. The coroner's job is to chase the truth, and so Ridpath has that innate tension in his job between looking to find somebody to blame versus looking to find the truth, and his natural predilection is always to look for the truth. It's one of the great strengths. The coroner system has been going since the Norman times, since 1080 or something was the first coroner. And again, comes from Crown, coroner from the Crown, and they, because in 1088 they wanted to separate the investigation of a death from the reasons why the death happened. So they set up the coronial system, and it's still going today. A coroner's job is to look at where somebody died, how they died, who died, what happened when they died, and then to make certain it doesn't happen again. It's not to actually affix blame. It's not to say this person did it. It's to work out what happened. And by, coroners do a pretty good job in the UK. Some better than others, but it's still one of the interesting facets of the English system, which nobody knows about. For example, in all police investigations, it's the coroner's officer who appoints the pathologist and decides whether the pathologist will produce a report or not the police.
And that's sort of an aspect of crime sort of investigations, or, just the response to crime, that I don't think we explore in crime novels as much.
No, I think there's only myself who writes about coroners, and there's a guy called Matthew Hall, who's written some very good novels, and now writes in Canada's TV series called The Coroner in Canada, which is different. But people don't seem to explore it. I'm quite amazed by that, because it's a fascinating, for me, fascinating area. And you immediately get, all crime books are looking for tension. And immediately you get a tension between what a coroner wants and what the police want. The police want a conviction, the coroner wants the truth. And there's a great tension there immediately, which, gives the Ridpath novels a stress and a tension right from the beginning, which hopefully I can exploit. And you can also then get into the whole courtroom drama, that Michael Connolly does so well in his Haller novels. At the end of the books is the coroners leading an inquest, and whether they do a Section 28 or not, it's still an interesting sort of time to look forward to.
Oh, are there coroners in all countries?
No, there are only about 100 coroners in the UK. Scotland operates a completely different system. England and Wales has coroners. Scotland has a completely different system. I think it's judge advocates, I'm not certain. There are coroners in America and Canada and in Australia, but they function in a different way. A coroner in America and Canada is much more like a pathologist or a medical examiner. They're not a separate branch of the judicial system as they are in the UK. Again, it goes back to Norman times. It's over 1,000 years old, the whole colonial system.
So we've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Well, you're over in Manchester. Are you going to be doing any author events?
I haven't set up any yet. I think I'm going down to Crime Fest in Bristol, when I'm doing one of the panels at Crime Fest, and then I'm going off to Harrogate. and I'm need to contact. Actually, I'm in Waterstones in Altrincham and in Manchester to do author events, and I think I'm also talking at the moment with Manchester Central Libraries as well. While I'm back there, but we'll see. Usually, as ever, I've left these things far too late. As ever, you get your head down and you're typing away, and invariably life catches up with you. I'm in this sort of little race to keep up with everything else that's going on. Actually, before we end, can I ask you a few questions? How many of these have you done now? You're very good at it, Karen. You're very good. So how many have you done now?
No idea.
Guess.
Maybe
Any
100?
questions for Caroline? I'm going to ask her. We're going to switch the tables for the last 2 minutes. So you don't know, 100, 150?
Yeah, maybe 100.
Okay. And we know you like the chemistry. Was it called the chemistry book? Is your favorite from last year? What's your top 3 crime novels that you remember?
Oh, that's a horrible question.
I know. I thought I'd ask you,
That's really mean. So Ellie Griffiths has got to have a massive shout out.
Yeah, I'm on the same panel as Ellie. I'll tell her, I think in Bristol.
Definitely probably one of my favourite crime authors of all time.
Yeah,
and
I read Jane Stone.
Loving it.
Yeah.
And I think I met her first time back in 2012.
Yeah. Oh, so long ago. Okay.
Yeah. So like even pre the group.
Yeah.
Massive fan. What else do I really like crime wise? I don't know, I'm struggling to think of 3.
See, you always put authors on the spot.
I can't narrow them down. Thinking of my other go-to crime authors that I'll always buy.
Yeah.
There's too many.
I mean, Connolly. I'll always read Connolly. He's always so fresh, even though his last one was a bit different. I think Val McDermid for me is a go-to, and Rankin. 3 guys. And then I've got some new ones. Recently is J.D. Kirk. I read one back in November and I've stopped reading him, but I'll start again because I think he's quite an interesting writer. Matt Brawley, I think, is a really interesting writer. I think he's doing lots of good stuff. Again, the young up-and-coming writers. And I think Marion does some interesting books out of Scotland, again, with Canelo. I think she does some great stuff.
Yeah,
so I've just bought you some time there to think of your 3rd author.
3rd? I think I only managed 1, didn't I? I really like the Bridgestocks because they're so accurate. I really like the Bridgestocks. They worked as police. Bob was a police.
Yeah.
Really high in the police, and Carol worked for them as a civilian. And I think you're in safe hands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I want to read Graham's book. Graham Barnett, again, because he was a chief super, I think, in Brighton, I think in Sussex. Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of T.G. Campbell's Bow Street Society series.
I haven't read his yet, so it'll be interesting. She?
She's a she, and they're like a revolving cast of characters.
Okay. Great.
The Victorian times who take on cases, and I love them.
Yeah, I'm always looking for new authors simply because when I writing like Ridpath, I don't read crime writers. I at the moment I'm reading a guy called William Shearer, and like his life story. He was a reporter in the 30s in Germany, and I only read crime stories when I'm not working because I said I don't want it to affect me, and secondly, I want to. That's like downtime, I want to treat it as relaxation rather than work. So when I'm actually writing like that, I generally read non-fiction because it's something I enjoy as well.
We're doing very badly for a crime interview because I'm currently reading J.D. Salinger.
Are you? Oh, which one? The
Rise High the Roof Beams.
Oh, okay. Again, I've read Catcher in the Rye. He's the, which I think everybody reads as a sort of, in your 16 or 17, you read about him. But again, he didn't write very much after Catcher in the Rye.
I
One or
didn't.
two
Catcher
other
in the
novels.
Rye is one of my all-time favorite books, so I've
Oh
been
yeah,
trying to correct that I've not read any of his others.
yeah. He again is, so at that time, same as Lee, the woman who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee. Same sort of, wrote one great book, first book, and then never really improved on it.
Actually, the others are good so
Is it?
far. The other ones I've read of his have been good as well.
Okay. It's interesting how that you do that. I mean, I feel myself I've got better the more I've written. So the first book, I look at it now, I think it's probably okay, but I think I've got better as I've written more. Whereas, I mean, people like Salinger, the first book they wrote was so earth-shattering, difficult to live up to that hype again. I'm just, yeah, it's like asking a parent who's their favorite child. I know.
It genuinely is. Because I've got so many more people I love that are like just in my head. And
yeah, exactly. I should have warned you I was going to do this anyway. But I thought we'd turn the tables for the last 5 minutes just to, And what are you reading next?
No idea.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I got, again on my Kindle, I've got the sort of 200 books on my TBR list, and it really is just what mood I'm in. At the moment, I'm in non-fiction mood, so I'll be doing lots of non-fiction for the next 3 months, because that's what what comes up, and then hopefully I can get onto crime again. But it's good to have that choice.
Look at the
Well, the great thing is, with Amazon, I'm suddenly finding I'm choosing books that I wouldn't normally choose. Again, if you're on BookBub and those sort of things, they're offering you books that you wouldn't normally go to. So next one I think I've got lined up is I'm doing the Shira, which is like 2,000 pages, which I'm about halfway through. And then the next one I've got lined up is the Macmillan Years, which is a sort of a history of Harold Macmillan, which, I thought interesting time. I'd like to read that next. This is my non-fiction period.
Finish us off with an advert for your books.
Okay.
What they're going away to buy.
Yeah. What the Shadows Hide, out now in paperback and ebook. I think the audio is coming out soon. I'd say just been chosen as the pick of the week by the newspaper renowned for its style and taste, The Sun, on Friday. I loved writing it. As Kat said, it has a bit of science in it, a bit of forensics in it, hopefully a nice mystery, and a bit of enough twists and turns to keep even a person who likes riding roller coasters happy. It's Manchester noir, which is the new invention for Manchester. I hope you enjoy reading it.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Next authors, by the way, please do exactly the same thing. Put her on the spot for the last 5 minutes. It's so much fun.
Definitely don't.
Bye, guys. Bye. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.
There you go. We're off.